Welcome to Service Headline News. I am Marty Smith.
And I'm Mary Pratt.
And we're here to bring you the latest headlines and updates pertinent to all servicemen and women. So sit back, get informed, and maybe have a laugh as the Swearing In Podcast presents Service Headline News. And Eric, what'd you shoot this week?
In my golf game?
In your golf game.
We shouldn't transition to golfing right away.
Oh, it was a bad game, huh?
When my wife can beat me in an 18 holes and I end up
first story.
And I end up buying dinner, you can tell my shooting was. You know, I had a couple good shots, good swings, but boy, my putting was terrible. Short game was terrible. So,
oh, jeez.
Moving right along.
So for this week of August 15th, actually on August 14th, 1945, Japan had surrendered, effectively ending World War II. Now, this isn't when we signed the formal document. That came later in September. But this is when Japan finally said, okay, no mas.
I'm going to use the term. They capitulated.
No mas. It says this was from History Channel. No news flash in modern history has ever been greeted with such overwhelming celebration. The iconic images of happy throngs holding up the newspapers that would go into countless scrapbooks and frames. The impromptu parades, hands in the air forming a V for victory, and the iconic images from Times Square, including the famous kiss between the nurse and the sailor.
Had to be an amazing time.
It's crazy, and I think there's a whole story about those two people that kissed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they didn't know each other. No, they didn't even know each other. I think.
No.
The formal surrender occurred later on September 2nd, 1945, on the USS Missouri, between representatives from the Empire of Japan and General Douglas MacArthur, who signed on behalf of the Allied nations. Followed by Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz as the U.S. representative. So there's your day in history on 14 August, 1945.
Nice. That allows me to transition to a great topic. I've got a real good Phil story here. In July, President Biden awarded the Medal of Honor to four U.S. Army soldiers who served in Vietnam. He bestowed the nation's highest military honor on 4 Army soldiers for their heroism above and beyond the call of duty during the Vietnam War. So we're talking about 50 years and finally being recognized.
Were all of them alive?
For your activity. I believe 3 are. Let's see. Biden is presenting the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Edward Kane-Shiro, Specialist 5 Dwight Birdwell, Specialist 5 Dennis Fuji, and Major John Duffy. Speaking in the East Room of the White House, President Biden praised their heroism and lamented on the fact that they hadn't received the appropriate recognition until now. Yeah. So Cassandro Kane-Shiro died in 1967 of a gunshot wound in Vietnam and is being given the award posthumously for a December 1st, 1966 raid where the unit came under fire by North Vietnamese troops. His actions were credited with helping his unit withdraw from the village that they were fighting in. Birdwell, now a lawyer in Oklahoma City, is being honored for his actions in helping to head off an assault and evacuate wounded at Tan Son Nhut Air Base near Saigon, January 31st, 1968. Despite his injuries to his torso and face, he was able to accomplish the mission. The other 2 are American Indian natives. Cherokee people have always done that and have carried out the tradition. So this was Birdwell, a member of the Indian Cherokee tribe.
Wow.
Fuji has been given the medal for actions on 4 days in February of 1971, treating wounded and directing airstrikes against enemy positions after his air ambulance was forced to crash land. Oh. So that story hits home for me because I really think it's imperative to recognize our heroes for actions above and beyond.
Sure.
And for that to not be recognized is a shame. So for us to get it 50 years later, better late than never.
Right.
So,
and it makes you wonder why was it never passed through? But there's so many politics, especially when you're talking about that high of a medal.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Some people at the time didn't think. It's almost like the Hall of Fame guys, right? for the Baseball Hall of Fame. We're like, no, we didn't. Those sports writers didn't think, but
Yeah.
maybe these sports writers.
I think when you go deep into the weeds on these particular actions, you go, holy cow, how was it even possible? And
Almost every write-up. I have a book, and I got it, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that, because they had a traveling Medal of Honor display that was, and I was a docent. I didn't even know what a docent was, but I was a usher, essentially.
Very cool.
Anyway, we got the book, and you just start reading, and it's just like, my God.
oh yeah, how do you put your fear away, swallow it, and do the things that some of these people
And most of them always have bleeding from multiple wounds. And
Oh,
you're
yeah.
like, oh God.
I fall down and scrape my knee and go, uh-oh, am I going to make it? So I got this story from the Associated Press, and Courtney Kube, K-U-B-E, has really turned out to be someone that I respect in her writing.
Oh, good.
So it was really cool to see that recognition for these 4 soldiers.
Okay, moving on to Space Force. That's why I'm wearing my Space Force shirt. See? Space Force.
Wait. Born to Kill in Space Force?
Heck yeah.
All right.
Heck yeah. All right, for the Military Times on 15 August, Space Force takes over all military satellite communications. Because first you're like, well, Army has some. I know Navy always had some. Well, the Army transferred. Now, this sounds reluctant by the Army, but anyway, here, listen to it. The Army transferred some of its satellite operations to the Space Force on Monday, marking the latest move to reorganize and grow the youngest military branch. In addition to control of the ComSats, 500 people will transfer from the Army Space and Missile Defense Command based in Huntsville, Alabama, to Schriever Space Force Base in Colorado as part of the expansion. Not the greatest place to be transferred to, but it is all set command and control down there at Schriever. Have you ever been to Schriever?
I have. I was actually working out of Schriever. But I will tell you, it's come a long ways. When Schriever was first identified, it was just a restricted area and nothing else.
Right.
Now they have a main exchange, they have base housing, they have a commissary. I mean, it's an actual base with a small community, finally.
And you still got that walk.
Yes, well, yes.
This historic transfer from the Army to the Space Force will mark the first time all Department of Defense military satellite communication functions have been consolidated under a single military service. That was from the Space Force, wrote that in a press release. Back in June, the Navy Satellite Operations Center, or NAVSOC, in Magoo, California, was placed under the Space Force's Space Delta 8 and designated as the new 10th Space Operations Squadron. So if you're wondering, this is just about the Army, well, the Navy did it earlier. So now here's the kicker. The Army has also transferred roughly $78 million of its budget to the Space Force for 2022 to help expand the service's infrastructure. So I'm sure the Army generals were pleased as punch to give up $78 million out of their budget.
I'm sure we could do a number of stories on Space Force. I think the development of that force is still a big question mark for me. Coming from, I retired out of Space Command at Peterson.
Right.
And I felt everything that Space Force is taking over, Space Command was already doing. Now, that is a novice comment. I don't know for sure.
Well, I think that's a fairly common thought.
So the understanding of what Space Force is actually doing, big question.
Now, if we roll the clock forward 20, 50 years, that it might make more sense.
Sure.
But anyway, they gobbled up all the SATCOM, so.
I got it. Okay, well, I being in the military, you being in the military, in the past, we always talked about preparing for a battle. And war planning was always something big that we talked about. Who are your potential enemies? How would they attack? What would they do? Right. Well, in the past, 2 decades or decade, 10 years, right? Decades, 10 years.
Sometimes.
The conflict in the world has been more towards insurgencies, more than just full-scale at least our involvement with full-scale war-to-war with a country.
Right.
Well, since China has started their saber rattling again, a think tank came together to war game, and it hasn't been done in quite some time.
Which is weird.
Right?
Yeah.
So did I, because when we grew up, in the military, it was wargaming. You
Did
had
they
the
just
war plan.
push it all in a drawer when the Berlin Wall came down? They're like, well, we're done with that.
It's also interesting that this article from a guy named Todd South out of Military News, it's a think tank. It's not even, now military personnel are involved in it, but it's actually a think tank. So here's the premise. In a pessimistic but realistic 2026 war game scenario, a combined sabotage and information operation campaign helped Chinese military forces land on the shores of Taiwan. Now that's the premise of the war plan. That's them attacking Taiwan, and how are we going to come to assist Taiwan, the time, the resources needed, the recovery to get there, those kind of things.
All right.
So the United States, caught off guard due to another magic bullet that's going to solve the invasion in a matter of hours or even days.
What do they mean by magic bullet?
I'm thinking just the response.
Oh, okay.
Because we've said in many of our TV news releases that we would support Taiwan militarily, not just from money. So in this room, you've got a number of folks. Let's see, layers in the air conditioning office of the Center for Strategic and International Studies huddled around conference room tables on August 5th. One room had the U.S. map of the Pacific region laid out, dotted with blocks of blue representing U.S. ships, manpower, and units. Beside this map is another dotted in red showing the Chinese military view of the conflict. So they continue to run multiple scenarios with an outcome, run it through a computer, and give you a percentage.
Oh, so these are all computer
simulated, generated possibilities of outcomes. This is one way to go beyond the headlines and official quotes for a nitty-gritty look at what it might take to counter China's ambitions for Taiwan in the foreseeable future. Ultimately, we end up winning the scenario after a number of attempts and scenarios that were run, but at a high cost. Doherty noted how the time frame helped show real-world considerations. In many days, long simulations, the United States takes many losses and in the end looks dire. But in a longer timeline, China takes more losses, and once again, the U.S. gets its forces flowing into theater, and the result is almost unchangeable. The U.S. wins, but at a heavy cost. So war planning and the prevention of trying to address every scenario that China could possibly throw at us, and what that outcome and what our response would be and what that outcome would be is pretty amazing.
It is. I don't know how they... I mean, obviously the extensive programming to go in there and take a whole bunch of factors, I guess.
Sure.
I mean...
and you have not only military members, but advocates of capabilities. You got a guy who knows what weapon systems and the capabilities of China's Navy, of their Air Force.
I guess, but we don't even know how they're going to fight.
No.
Yeah, I mean that's...
not since Korea have we seen China involved.
China was just brute force.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of strategy in Korea, right?
Throw people, waves of people.
You know, we had that one discussion about how the Russian or the Soviets back then feared the United States military because the commanders don't follow their own doctrine, right?
Yep.
Whereas communists have to follow their own doctrine. Yep. So is that how they're going to fight? And what, how do you program? Okay, they'll trigger a nuke here. Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of crazy.
Everything's being addressed from time.
I'm sure it is.
Time, resources, and strategy, and it's in an age of data mining, advanced algorithms, machine learning, and seemingly endless computer-run simulations. What value would an old-fashioned tabletop map, game pieces, and a fistful of 20-sided dice hold?
Right. I mean, I get two thoughts. Right. I get the whopper from war games.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That was running the scenarios. And then it just decided, the only winning move is not to play, right? And shut it all
I
down.
like that personally.
But then you have the Madden simulation that they do for every Super Bowl. And they're like, out of 50 simulations, the Seahawks win.
Right. Well, and I think there's something part to it because there are principles of this thing that aren't going to change. For instance, the time that we're notified or have a time to respond. That's not going to change much. We're not going to be able to do it immediately because we're not going to know it quickly if it's a surprise kind of attack.
Right.
So our response will be slow, which puts us at a disadvantage almost immediately. And then here's the big question. Is Taiwan, just like Ukraine, are they able to defend themselves?
No.
And will they? Will they stand up?
They got nothing.
Well, that's a point. So the question goes on, will they? Can they? And do they have the equipment? Not based on our support.
Right. And I guess with the big beats, right? They run a scenario where China starts with missile strikes, or they run a scenario where China lands on the beach or drops troops. I get those big beats to kind of kick the whole thing off. I suppose then you can come up with some natural responses and then counter responses, and you can go from there.
And that's funny. Can't you see these 20 big heads in 2 separate rooms all converging to do the right thing and the right response?
I don't know. Are they just doing that, or are they just rely on the simulation?
No, I think the simulation's part, but the input
like
into
maybe
the simulation.
maybe it gets to some kind of decision point.
Yeah.
Maybe they're like, hey, you got 100 Chinese made T-80s versus 50,
Taiwanese.
whatever it is, I suppose, but maybe it stops at a certain point. It'd be interesting to find that out.
Well, and I think you what's the term when you have indirect and direct leadership? I can't remember. There was a term for it. Anyway, that's the kind of input where you get a creative leader who says, well, based on this, here's what I might do.
Well,
and it's off the wall thinking to see what it does to the simulation by changing it.
Maybe. Or you have a situation like Chamberlain and Little Round Top. By every simulation, he should have been overrun.
Yep.
But he held it, and that changed that whole battle. So who knows? But I guess it's comforting to know we'd win.
Well, and it is comforting to know, and strange in my opinion, that we now take our war planning to think tanks. And we have military personnel again, but we also have a number of outside organizations that are trying to assist, which is
I wonder how they're doing that. Yeah, right.
I don't know.
I don't know if you got Raytheon's rep in there. He's like, shoot more missiles. I'm like, oh, great, good for us, good for Raytheon.
I'm sure everybody have an opinion then.
Right.
Woo.
Okay, moving right along. As we all know, the military is having a hard time recruiting, right? So from the Navy Times on August 11th, the headline is Navy offers future sailors and veterans up to $115,000 in enlistment and loan repayment incentives.
I believe it might be time to go see my recruiter.
You listen to the story first. Says Navy has a plan now for future sailors and veterans who agree to re-up. Can combine the maximum enlisted bonus with a maximum student loan repayment. So, if you're a veteran, you don't have a student loan, you ain't getting $115,000. Okay. Right? So to cap out so both of those can cap you out at $115,000. Provided they, and this was, what's the date again? August 11th. So basically, hold on, let me break down the $115,000. The Navy has raised the maximum enlisted bonus to $50,000. Now that's not going to be for every.
Just a re-enlistment bonus at $50,000.
I can't imagine that's for every job, right? Oof. But
it's got to be for critical positions.
They did that in February, and said the incentives aim to attract the quote highest quality of recruits end quote, and come as all the services struggle to hit recruitment goal quotas this fiscal year. The maximum loan repayment is $65,000. So together, that's $115,000. With this caveat, provided they enlist or reassess into active duty and can ship out before the end of September. The date of this story is August 11th.
So you're gone. Sign the paperwork.
You're gone. Now here's the a little bit more of this fine print. Navy veterans are veterans from other services. So say you are Army, Air Force, you want to go back in the Navy for this cash. You must have previously served at least 12 consecutive weeks on active duty to qualify for the bonuses. Okay. They're not eligible for these incentives if they previously received an enlistment bonus. Ooh, that's some fine print.
That's going
right?
to cut a lot of loss there.
While Navy veterans are required to complete in-processing at Recruit Training Command Great Lakes, veterans from other services must also complete a 3-week naval orientation course at Recruit Training Command Great Lakes. So, okay, that's fair. You need to learn the language and all that stuff. Those who re-enter active duty will serve in pay grade E4 or below.
That's not very much incentive there.
I know. It is for a first termer.
Especially, well,
I mean, if they're gearing for a one enlistment guy,
yeah,
and they're like, hey, come back on in, and we'll.
How many of that? You would think more of a veteran type kind of guy who's 10 years. I got out. Now I'm going to go back.
Maybe, who knows? I mean, because if he served one enlistment, he's got GI Bill, so he shouldn't have that loan of $65,000. So I don't know. It's a weird
Unless
how
that's
that's
one
going
of
to be
those
executed.
they pass to a dependent or a child.
Maybe.
Right? Okay.
Maybe. I mean, there's money there, but it doesn't sound like it's as broad sweeping as, hey, just come back in the Navy, we'll give you $115,000.
Right.
It's like maybe not. Hey, E6, we're gonna put you back as an E4. And you don't get a bonus because you got one before. You got to go back to Great Lakes.
So it's amazing what that big picture.
Shit.
Look at this money, and then don't read anything below it.
Oh, right.
The money is all you're supposed to see.
What's recruiters do anyway when they're like, hey, there's a $10,000 bonus on this? Really? Yeah, it's prorated over those 4 years.
Yeah.
You're saying like, oh shit.
Yeah,
and it's taxed.
You get nothing. $3,500, and by the way, you got to go buy your uniforms now, so you're not getting that.
Don't go spend it on that car right outside of base that you can get for 50% interest rate.
That new 14x70 trailer right outside. Yeah, there you go.
So that's the Navy's try for the rest of the fiscal year. And you know why it probably is by September? Because I think that's the end of the recruiting fiscal year.
Get their numbers.
Yeah, try.
All
and
right.
I think October starts a new one. They're like, we're off. All you
We're
guys,
taking
no more.
now.
So interesting. It's a shame we got this. We're not meeting recruiting goals, but we could have a whole episode on that. So
Right.
Anyway,
last but not least, another feel-good story, depending on how you see it.
yeah.
As
I think so.
women's involvement in our military expands and those roles become more combat, I have one from another of my favorite writer, Courtney Koob from the Military Times. For the first time in its 76-year history, this is big, the Navy's famed Blue Angels aerial demonstration team will feature a female pilot.
Outstanding. Good on the Navy.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
when you talk
that's
about
pretty cool.
that skill. The Navy on Monday named Lieutenant Amanda Lee as one of the Blue Angels' newest corps members. Since 1946, the Blue Angels have performed dazzling aerial displays at air shows, sporting events, and other flight demonstrations, providing community outreach and an important recruiting tool for the U.S. Navy. That also includes the capability of combat.
Yeah. I mean, we got, I wonder how many there are. I wonder how many
as far as
combat pilots are.
I'm sure
She was flying FA-18s, right?
Correct.
So.
Super Hornets. So I think this is huge. Lee of Mounds View, Minnesota, is now on a flight demonstration team, Strike Fighter Squadron 106, known as the Gladiators. She's stationed in Virginia Beach, Virginia. She's expected to report to the Blue Angels in the fall and will train with the squadron through the winter. Her first event will likely be early next year, the Navy said. So that's huge.
Yeah.
I do have a little extra on her. In 2019, Lee participated in the first female flyover as part of a funeral service for Rosemary Mariner, a retired captain who was one of the Navy's first female pilots, and the first woman to command a naval aviation squad. So ultimately, the women's role in our military is expanding, and I think it's a good thing.
I remember when they were debating, they've been debating it forever, right? Especially when I was in the Army, should women be in the combat, so on and so forth. I don't think there was a man among us who said women couldn't be great pilots.
No.
Right?
Anyway.
It's a great story. I don't know why that doesn't make it up there. I saw a similar story. I don't know what the year was, but she was giving a speech. She was the first female aircraft commander, or aircraft carrier captain.
Oh.
I was like, wow, I didn't even know we had one of those.
That's big.
So why don't they push those stories? Those are interesting,
And that's not just, usually those guys are in charge of a Navy carrier group.
Yeah.
With multiple ships and stuff.
So I don't know. But good. I'm glad we're moving that way. Okay. I think that's it for today.
I agree.
So I agree. That's enough. On behalf of Master Sergeant Parat, I'd like to thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please leave a like and share the podcast with someone else. Let us know how we did in the comments. And as always, make sure to download the next episode for more service headline news. Eric, we'll see you next week.
Again, see you next week.